How can you improve your public speaking skills and present more like the people at the TED Talks? Well, that's what we're going over today in the top takeaways of Talk Like TED by Carmine Gallo. What's going on, guys? It's Nick from Mindful Mastery, and I'm here today to help you master your mind. At the end of this video, I'm going to be talking about my favorite takeaway and how I'm going to apply it to my life. So I want you to do the same. At the end of this video, please comment the one thing that you learned from this video and how you're going to apply it to your life. And as always, if you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't. Takeaway number one, the 3 P's. The first P, passion. There was a study talked about in the book where it took a group of people and then surveyed them. They were then separated into 2 columns. One was highly enthusiastic and the other was low enthusiasm. They were then mixed together within a room and they weren't allowed to talk to each other. And afterwards, they were then surveyed again. And they found that the people that were originally highly enthusiastic remained that way. But they found that the people that were low enthusiasm at first actually improved in their enthusiasm and their mood. So whenever you're going to choose a topic for your presentation, you need to make sure that you're passionate about it in order to spread your passion to the audience. But you might not know if you're passionate about anything. So you need to ask yourself, what makes my heart sing? So if you're presenting for a company, you would normally talk about the numbers and statistics and those sorts of things. But you might really enjoy the community and family environment that comes with the company. So rather than focusing on the statistics, you can focus on that. You can still sprinkle the statistics and numbers in there, but it's better to focus on what you're passionate about in order to spread that passion to the audience. The second P is practice. Most of the people that give TED Talks practice for hundreds of hours before the final product. Now, I'm not saying that you should practice for 100 hours, but if you're a college student, then you might want to practice for 6 or 7 hours. And if you're giving more of a professional presentation, then you might want to do like 20, 30, or 40. The goal is to just make sure that you know the information and to get as much feedback as possible. So you need to present to your friends, family, and actually take as many opportunities as you can to present to people that you don't know so that you can continue to get feedback and continue to improve your presentation. And you also need to keep a couple things in mind while you're practicing. The first is pacing. So this is something that I really struggle with. As you can probably tell, I talk super fast in most of my videos, so I'm constantly trying to remind myself to slow down. But there are some times whenever you do actually want to speed up, like whenever you're talking about something super intense. But you also want to slow down whenever you're talking about something a little bit more emotional or sad. Another thing that you want to pay attention to and apply to your presentations is pauses. And they actually help build up the suspense for what you're about to say, making it so much more meaningful. So try to apply those to your presentations whenever you really want to emphasize something. The third P is presence. Now this mainly has to do with body language, nonverbals, and really trying to command the stage. And I actually did a book review on what everybody is saying, which talks a lot about nonverbals. So if you're interested in that, then I'll have it linked up here or here. I'm not for sure. But the first thing that it talks about in the book is gestures. And this can also be super helpful whenever you're really trying to emphasize something. But you want to make sure that you don't overuse them because that will take away from the things that you're actually trying to emphasize. And this is actually another thing that I'm really trying to work on. I do spend a lot of times moving my hands, so I gotta really try and remind myself to calm down and keep them in one place. But the other thing that you really want to pay attention to with your presence is appearing confident to the audience. Because if you don't appear confident, then it won't really seem like you know what you're talking about. So the audience won't really have any motivation to pay attention and try to remember what you talk about. The first thing that you can do to improve your appearance of confidence is by owning the stage and moving around it. Because if you aren't knowledgeable about what you're talking about, then you're more likely to stay in one space because you're much more focused on what you're trying to say. Another thing that you can do is by actually making sure that you have good posture during your presentation. This will do 2 things. Not only will it help you appear more confident, but physiologically, it will actually release chemicals that will make you more confident. And lastly, you want to make sure that you aren't fidgeting or keeping your hands in your pockets. This makes it seem like you're unsure about what you're talking about, which makes it look like to the audience that you're trying to mislead them. Takeaway number 2, the rule of 3. So most people can only remember about 3 bits of information, and if you go up to 4, 5, or 6, then they start forgetting more and more. So you want to make sure that you only have 3 key points whenever you're giving your presentation. If we take a look at the message map from the book, then we can begin to outline your presentation. So as you can see, it started off with a headline or a title, and then from there it goes down to the 3 key points, and then it has 3 supporting points. And I want to take a minute to touch specifically on the headline or the title. You want to make sure that this is simple but still encapsulates all that is involved in your presentation. This is because it is what your audience will first go to whenever they're trying to recall your presentation. And from there, they will then go to your 3 key points and then to your 3 supporting points. So if you have a good, simple, but memorable headline, then it will help make your entire presentation much more memorable. Takeaway number 3, don't rely on words. Now, obviously, I don't mean you shouldn't be speaking that much during your presentation. That is a must. But I'm mainly talking about whenever it comes to your PowerPoints. You want to make sure that they aren't overwhelmed with words. And this is because that whenever people are reading something, it is encoded similarly to whenever they are trying to hear something. So if they're listening to you speak while they're also trying to read your PowerPoint, then it makes it so much more difficult for people to remember something. So what you can do instead is limit the amount of words on there, obviously, but you can also add pictures and videos because this helps add a visual representation of what you're talking about as well. And the book actually talks about a study that was done that found that people, whenever they were told something, 3 days later, they could only remember 10% of the information. But whenever that was accompanied with a visual, then they were able to remember 65% of the information. So let me give you an example. There was a TED Talk about breast augmentation surgery where he first started off a picture where he was surrounded by Barbie dolls and then the guy was at the center of it. It then zoomed out a little bit and showed even more Barbie dolls. It zoomed out one more time and then it actually revealed that all of the Barbie dolls together made up 2 breasts. He then went on to say that there were 32,000 Barbie dolls in that entire picture. And that's how many women get surgery each year. And most of those are below the age of 21. So rather than focusing on the statistics, he used the Barbie dolls to put the statistics in perspective and give you a visual of what he was talking about. But you need to try and engage as many senses as possible. Another example is whenever someone was talking about chronic pain. So he first started off with, imagine that I'm rubbing this feather. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a very tiny feather. But imagine that I'm rubbing this on your arm. Now, imagine that I'm rubbing this blowtorch on your arm. Now, this isn't a blowtorch, but it gets the point across. So, what does this have to do with chronic pain? Well, imagine that I'm rubbing this feather on your arm, but your brain thinks that it feels like this blowtorch. So now the audience actually will begin to feel the sensation of a blowtorch on next to the arm at least, if not beginning to feel what it's like to have the blowtorch being aimed directly at the arm, which makes the memory so much more visceral and real to the audience members, which will help them relate the idea of chronic pain to the presentation. Takeaway number 4, tell a story. There was a study that was talked about in the book where someone was recorded telling a story. That story or video was then played back to an audience, and what they found was that the brain responses were matching the responses from the audience compared to the person that was telling the story. So simply by telling a story, it created an emotional connection between the presenter and the audience, even though they weren't even present at the time. And there are 3 main types of stories. The first is telling the success or the failure of a business. The second is telling the story about someone else. And then the third is telling a personal story. And this is my favorite kind of story because it begins to let your guard down, which helps the audience begin to relate to you so much more, deepening the connection between you and your audience member. So let me tell you a personal story of my own. It was Valentine's Day in the 5th grade, and I had a girl that I had a crush on. So I went to my mom and I asked her to go to Walmart. I then went there and then picked out the best but cheapest teddy bear I could find and a box of chocolates. The next day, I woke up and put on my best shirt and told my mom that she would need to extend my curfew to 8 o'clock that night because I was super confident that everything was gonna go well. So then I get to school, I go into the classroom, I go up to my crush, I put out the teddy bear and the box of chocolates, and I ask her, "Will you be my Valentine's?" And she says, "No." I was devastated. All of that buildup and confidence completely shattered in an instant. So I did the one logical thing that a 5th grade boy would do. I went over to my desk, I took the teddy bear, and I bawled my eyes out into it. Now, I might not be the best storyteller, but you certainly visualized something as I was telling the story and kind of went with me into the story in your mind. So you at worst just visualized me bawling into the teddy bear, but this helped create a visual representation of the story that I was telling while also helping to create an emotional response within you, whether it's sadness or joy or just laughter because it was a little bit of a goofy story. Takeaway number 5, make it unique. You need to make sure that you surprise your audience as much as possible because there is so much information out there and it takes a lot to cut through all that and get your audience's attention so that they will make sure that they pay attention and try and remember what you tell them. You can do this a couple different ways. One way is by using a prop. And Bill Gates does this whenever he is talking about malaria during his TED Talk. So he says, it's not fair that only poor people get malaria from mosquitoes. And as he says that, he unscrews the jar that is filled with mosquitoes. So he then goes on to reveal that the mosquitoes are malaria free. But you can probably imagine that the people in the audience at least had an initial sense of fear about getting malaria, which made the experience so much more visceral and emotional and created a much stronger connection, making them much more likely to remember the experience. Another way that you can make it more memorable and unique is by making it funny. Now, I don't mean telling jokes. Something that Carmine talks about in the book is that people are awful at telling jokes and their execution generally tends to offend some people. So unless you're a comedian, you need to make sure that you steer clear of jokes. You can be funny simply by telling a story like the one I did earlier, or by using metaphors or anecdotes or those sorts of things. And this actually extends further than just giving presentations, because it was found that executives who know how to use humor and use it more often tend to make more than those that don't. So simply by using humor, you can make more in your career. And this is my favorite takeaway and is the one that I will be applying to my life. So there are a lot of self-improvement YouTube channels out there, and I want to try and make mine stand out a little bit by including something funny in all of my videos. So obviously I wouldn't initially have you laughing throughout the entirety of the video, nor would I necessarily even want you to. But the thing that I'm doing to try and improve the comedy and make it a little bit more funny is by adding humor at least once into each and every video. So with this one, I added the Valentine's story because I at least thought that one was funny. But now it's your turn. Comment the one thing that you learned from this video and how you are going to apply it to your life. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and have a great day.